Sorry.
Yeah, sorry for the poor introduction there. We had some bad timing communication from the lab. So we've had some questions about use cases about 11U, about carrier architecture integrating with carrier networks or service provider networks, some of those types of things. I don't know if you guys have specific things that you would like to have him talk about.
But I think there was that one, to get things warmed up and started, to put you on the spot all of a sudden, one of the things that we've had people say legitimately is Ruckus a carrier company or are we an enterprise company? And so if you could just talk to that, there's markers if you need them.
Yeah. So short answer, we said to both are very important markets for us.
I'm sorry, is your mic muted?
I don't know.
I thought I had it on.
Tess, is that okay?
Much better.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
So the short answer is that we sell to both, carrier and enterprise. Both are very important for us. There's a lot of synergy development-wise internally between these two markets. I can talk a little bit about that. Of course, the go-to-market is very different. The channel is different. The customers are different. But from a development perspective, we try to address both markets. There are some unique requirements, of course, on both that we have to address. But there's quite a bit that is common across them. Definitely on the AP side, on the hardware side, on the performance side, on the interference and so on. But also a lot of the techniques and innovation we developed for one market went into the other. One example, if I go into specifics, Channelfly, which I think you heard about, that
I think they've all
was developed originally for the carrier market, but has served us really well on the enterprise market as well. That's something the initial need, the initial requirement came from the carrier, but we developed that and then it moved into the enterprise. At the same time, if I take some of the examples on the enterprise side, some of the features we developed there, like, let's say, having visibility into the type of device that is on the network, whether it's a Apple device versus a BlackBerry versus a Windows machine, that has a lot of benefits on the carrier side as well. They actually are interested in very similar things too, in quite a different level, of course. It's not a school or an enterprise that is looking at only their devices and maybe some devices you bring from home, but it's a carrier looking at the tens of thousands of APs out there and trying to understand the distribution of devices across the network.
Why are carriers wanting Wi-Fi? What do they care about it?
So carrier market for us is a general name for quite a few service providers, and they differ in segments and needs. The first example is mobile carriers, the likes of, here in the US, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, and so on. Their primary problem is the capacity they have on the cellular network. Whether they're a 3G operator or a 4G LTE operator, doesn't really matter. If you look at the trends over time, the demand requirements for capacity are by far higher than anything they can ever provide using the spectrum they have. So they're looking to ways to address that. Some of the ways you're familiar with are adjusting the plans, charging you more, adding more cells, shrinking the cell size using 3G or LTE. All of these are great and good and helping them, but it's not enough. Every year there are new devices, new applications. The demand curve is just going much higher. So Wi-Fi is an alternative. If you're in a location that has Wi-Fi, it actually gives you better overall throughput than you can get over the 3G. So it's a good thing. And people adjust their behavior actually based on that. You go to a coffee shop, you try to browse the internet, you probably try to look for Wi-Fi. People got used to it. So in their perspective, it's just another option they have in their portfolio to give you, as a consumer, more bandwidth. What that means is that the model has changed significantly from their perspective, from having an AP in a coffee shop where, okay, go there, find it yourself, and you're on your own. I don't care about it. You just off my network. Into it's an access option that I manage and I own and I control. And as a result, the user experience for you as a subscriber is important. I want to make sure that I authenticate you. I want to make sure that I get you on Wi-Fi versus 3G or LTE at the right time. I want to make sure that the policy you have is enforced even though you're on Wi-Fi. So all of these requirements are coming into the Wi-Fi space as well. So we spend a lot of time there. If we have time, I can talk a bit more about that. But that's just one example for the carrier or service provider market. If we look at fixed line operators, cable operators or fixed in general, they don't have, typically, unless they are a carrier that has both, they don't have a spectrum today. The wireless option is Wi-Fi, and they're doing it for quite a few reasons. Part of it is things like reducing churn. They have subscribers, they have home, let's say cable, and when they go to a coffee shop, given they don't have cellular option with that cable operator, they look for some wireless option. So being able to provide them Wi-Fi is a good thing. There's a marketing value for that as well. I give you a nicer package. I might be able to charge more for that. I might be able to have roaming agreements with other partners, other operators. So if you travel, you can get that sort of access as well. I might be able to sell capacity or offload capacity for mobile operators. So I'm, as a cable operator, have the backhaul, have the power, have a Wi-Fi network there. You, as a mobile operator, can come and buy capacity from me. So there's a lot of business reasons why they want to do that.
Do you see fixed line carrier relationships being more about fixed line providing transport for Wi-Fi services, or more about reciprocal services for the end user to provide, to get connected or authenticated at hotspot type of applications?
Not sure, can you,
So fixed line operators,
Yeah.
you say the relationship is sometimes twofold, right? There's a focus on the end user and being able to authenticate that user, provide additional services of mobile hotspots,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
Or using fixed line as transport for Wi-Fi services.
Got it.
Which do you see being more?
The primary reason they started going into the market is the first one. That is their subscribers, reducing churn, getting more value for their subscribers, maybe enabling more services based on that. That's why they went into this opportunity to begin with. While they were doing it, they figured out, hey, the investment is the same. All I need to do is enable an SSID, figure out how to connect back to someone else. Why won't I do that? But the primary reason to start was the subscriber.
Do you see that being big in the US or in other countries?
It's big in the US. It's also big outside of the US. Some public customers we announced, Time Warner is a customer of ours. They're doing it, so clearly a tier one. If you look outside of the US, a lot of areas have operators that are really hybrid. That is, they obviously have fixed line side, but they also have a mobile side to it. So it's not really a fair comparison. But in areas that have an operator that is fixed line only, let's take British Telecom, BT in the UK, they have a strong, fairly extensive Wi-Fi initiative. So we talked about mobile operators, we talked about fixed line. Other applications that carriers look at are wholesaling. We briefly touched about that when we talked about fixed line. That's the ability to deploy a network and then go out and sell capacity to others. There are some providers that are doing it just as a Wi-Fi provider. We have a customer, right now it's called BSkyB, but it used to be the cloud. They got acquired. That was their business. They did hotspots and they provided services to subscribers. And then there's, of course, managed services. These are carriers that part of their business is to sell services into enterprises. And this is one example how requirements really converge, because the end customer is an enterprise customer. They care about a lot of the same things as a school, actually exactly the same thing as a school that would buy it from our channel. But in some cases, they want to buy a complete service, and they buy it from a carrier, from a service provider. Ruckus customer is the service provider, but the end customer is actually enterprise. And that's another revenue-generating business for the service provider, so they care about it quite a bit.
Are enterprise and carrier getting farther apart or closer together? I mean, the markets themselves.
Oh, the convergence is happening every day. From the very basic fact that all of you travel with your own devices, it doesn't matter if you're on the carrier network, on your enterprise network, it's the same devices. So these things converge. The expectation of the subscribers is to have the best access possible anywhere they go, anytime. They don't care if it's Wi-Fi, if it's 3G. They care about, is it fast, reliable, and how much do I pay?
Yesterday you were talking to Marcus and I about you walk into like deploying a building, right? Take all the buildings here in Silicon Valley. The typical deployment is they hire somebody like us, and we pick a vendor, and they end up selling it. How is that changing?
Yeah, so we talked about managed service. I think where you're leading me is a trend that is up and coming, and I'll tie it back maybe to 802.11u and Hotspot 2.0 or Passpoint, as they call it right now. One of the biggest challenges with Wi-Fi, especially being compared to cellular networks from a subscriber perspective, there are three major issues. One is how easy it is to go on the network. When all of you came here, I'm assuming most of you are actually not based in the Bay Area. You took a plane, you landed in SFO, you turn your phone on, it just worked. You didn't need to do anything. On the Wi-Fi side, that's not the case. You had to look for something. So that's the discovery and selection of a Wi-Fi network is definitely a problem. Second issue is security. On the cellular network, things are encrypted, you are authenticated, you know who you are. Most hotspots today are still open. That is a risk that all of us as subscribers are taking. We rather get the access knowing that we might be exposed, but it will likely change with time. There's definitely a need there to secure. The third one is, of course, how reliable and how good the Wi-Fi service is versus the cellular. When you own your own spectrum, you can guarantee the end user experience. Wi-Fi is unlicensed spectrum, a lot of interfering devices. That's kind of like where the Ruckus magic is, and I'm sure you heard about that from others, from Bill, Victor, and Steve. The two first problems, the issue of network selection or discovery and selection and security, are being addressed right now by standards like Hotspot 2.0, 11u, Passpoint.
Can you speak to client adoption of Hotspot 2.0
Yeah.
timelines?
Yeah, I'll talk to that as well. That standard in its first release that has got to the point of a Wi-Fi line certification, I think in July, so a couple of months back. The first release is about network selection or discovery and selection. That is, you turn on your phone, you have an AP that maybe is a Ruckus AP, advertising a Ruckus SSID, but you are an AT&T customer, being able to ask the network, do you have AT&T for me? Get the answer yes, and then associate as an AT&T subscriber, go all the way back for authentication, and so forth. That piece has been completed from a standardization perspective. There are devices that are being tested against it. Ruckus is actually part of the test bed in the Wi-Fi lines. There are, as far as I remember, like the latest information, there are 2 phones that are already certified. I believe there's also laptops based on Intel that are certified as well. And more phones are probably going to be added as well. The iPhone is not.
Why is it so hard to get your hands on that client to test?
Good question. I don't have a good answer for that. I would expect that at this point, it would be much easier to just get a handset and just try it out. For some reasons that are mostly around the adoption cycle, the ecosystem of devices between the vendors that manufacture the Apples, LGs, HTCs, Samsung of the world as part of the ecosystem. Then the operators, AT&T, Verizon, and so on. And then the AP vendors is not completely in sync right now in this one specifically. It takes time. I wish it moved much quicker. I think there's a major need for that. I think we are a few months away from being in a much better spot. And what I mean by that is a critical mass of devices that will be certified and a much easier access to that sort of software from whatever device you have. And from there, I think adoption would become much faster. On the infrastructure side, what we can control, Ruckus and other Wi-Fi vendors, it's a software upgrade.
Right.
So we actually support it already in our software. It's available. So there's nothing that's blocking deployment right now. It's just a matter of time.
Bragging on Ruckus a little bit, where are we at? Are we involved in the .11u process?
Yes, as I said, we are absolutely heavily involved. We are part of the test bed for release 1 that's completed. And any new device has to be tested against Ruckus as part of that. We are also very involved in the definition and spec of the second release. The second release of Passpoint, or Hotspot 2.0, is trying to address 2 additional problems beyond network discovery and selection. One is online sign-up. the experience of going on the network at the first time, how easy it is versus let me scan for an SSID, okay, let me try this one, let me go to a portal, let me download something, and so on. That process is just not friendly. So that's one thing that is being addressed, online sign-up. The second one is what they call operator policy, and that's the ability to control from the operator perspective on what you actually do on the Wi-Fi side. They have full control on the cellular side, but on the Wi-Fi side, it's obviously not standardized right now. So
I interrupted a question,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's quite all right. You know, the tune that I get is that a lot of manufacturers, Ruckus being one, is, you know, being leading edge, you know, trying to keep up with the standards. But that's only half the equation, right? When we start looking at clients, you know, let's look at later 211n, you know, with spatial streams, 2x3x2s, 3x3x3s. We still don't even have clients other than a handful that support that.
Yeah.
So what is Ruckus and let's say other manufacturers doing to help educate, you know, mobile providers with handsets? You know, Apple just released 5 gigahertz. I mean, should
4 years too late.
You know, a year or two more, you know, ago, it should have happened.
yeah, and all of the names you mentioned are definitely participating in the standard organizations, but unfortunately, the pace of how they move and how they actually release things is beyond our control, or actually any vendor's control, any Wi-Fi vendor control. We are engaged with all of them. We are more than happy to work with them to help them move faster. They are involved. It's not like they're ignoring it completely. It's just they're not moving in the pace that I think all of us in the room would want them to move. The level of influence in that ecosystem, a lot of the power resides at the phone manufacturers, the Apples, actually the Googles of the world, the OS guys, and not necessarily, or for sure not at the Wi-Fi vendor side.
But the carrier, would it be true to say that the carriers are the one pushing? I mean,
Yes.
they're the ones that really need this.
Yeah, they're the one that's pulling it, absolutely. The carriers are trying to get this in. At the same time, they also try to get LTE, and they try to get you know, many other things on the cellular side, so they have a lot of priorities. As I said, I think we are a few months away from a critical mass in the ecosystem.
With the, like we all know that 5 gigahertz is where things are at, and like George was saying, the support with N has been pretty poor in a lot of cases. On the sort of 3G, 4G offload, are we likely to see hotspots moving to 5 because of the higher attenuation? Do they want the cell to be large? You know, it's not going to be as large as a standard cell that they're using, but we're likely to see more 2.4 there.
No, I think 5 gig is a huge thing. I think yesterday's announcement from Apple is just fantastic. It's a huge thing for the industry as a whole. I think 5 gig has so much more capacity. And remember, the issue here from the carrier perspective, from the mobile carrier perspective, is not coverage. For coverage, they have 3G, they have the cellular network. They don't need Wi-Fi for
Capacity.
it. What they want is capacity, and 5 gig is just awesome for that. All the things that can be a bad thing when you think about coverage, the fact that if you put it indoors, it doesn't propagate, actually good thing. When you think about capacity, to isolate that specific cell, you can add many more cells in the same area. You have many more megahertz of bandwidth available. I mean, it's just a great thing, and I think it would increase adoption of Wi-Fi quite a bit.
Can you talk a bit, when we're talking about capacity, that's obviously the capacity on the spectrum, right? But for the carriers and MNOs to better control the traffic, they are tending to centralize everything to their core.
Yeah.
So what do you see? Because there are many offload options. You can drop it on the access.
Yes.
You can centralize it. So what do you have? What's the feedback?
It's a good question. Actually, I missed addressing that when I started. Can I do a quick whiteboard? Do I have time?
We have but less than 2 minutes.
That's no.
Like
So
negative
I think that's if you look at an overall network, there's a trend here. This is an AP, and typically you have a controller in the network. And if this is a mobile network, you'll have in their world SGSN, GGSN, or in EPC, S gateway and P gateways. Let's have one box representing the core, and then you have the internet here. And here on the interface outside, they have a lot of services. That's where they enforce all their policies, they do DPI, they do a lot of things. They want to use it. The
mobility, IP, controlling the radios.
Yes. The the way the industry has moved is at the beginning, as I said, there was the Starbucks model. You put an AP, you forget about it, you don't care about it. They're moving now all the way to the other side where they say, even though you're coming from Wi-Fi, I want it to behave the same as you're coming from 3G. So really the Wi-Fi network needs to look back to the core as if you're coming from an SGSN. So you authenticate it using the SIM card, 802.1x, ePSIM, ePAKA. And then the next step is you take the traffic through an SSID, through maybe your gateway controller, all the way to their GGSN. And then they know to do everything from there.
So there's options of doing that. And what do you see? What's most in demand? Everybody starts with, okay, IVLAN is 3GPP-like, right? But that's almost impossible to implement.
Yes.
Then IPv6 tunneling also provides the mobility, but that's also tough to provide end-to-end.
Yeah.
So how do you combat that? How do you go about?
Yeah. So the trend, as I said, is moving from this, I don't care about it, to get me everything. And I think the next step, by the way, will happen in a couple of years, will be let me push some of the intelligence back to the edge. Don't lose the services, but break out traffic before.
So like LTE?
Not necessarily like LTE. LTE still, if you look at an eNode B, it would go back to a P gateway. What I mean from a traffic perspective.
Much more control at the edge in comparison to
yes.
GSM.
From that perspective, yes. The IWLAN standard that you mentioned is really relying heavily on a client component that is
it's
not
directly to the.
So really, it's the Wi-Fi infrastructure that is taking care of that, and specifically the gateway here. In our
Do we
case,
have one of those?
Yes, it's called the Smart Cell Gateway. It's actually a pretty nice one. and really what it does is it takes this Wi-Fi network, makes everything look to the handset the same as any other Wi-Fi network, and then northbound looking to the core as if it's coming from an RNC, as if it's coming from an SGSN. So it bridges these two networks.
What kind of northbound interfaces are you using?
The one that is the most common is GTP.
Yeah.
So you basically create a PTP context using the MSISD and the phone number that you get from the HLR or AAA, and that helps the GGSN know exactly which is the subscriber. PCRF can provide the policy. You really act as if you're part of the cellular network.
Yeah.
That's the key
But
piece.
I think that one doesn't provide for the mobility IP, correctly?
It does. It does.
It does.
So if I have 30 more seconds, from a flow perspective,
You're killing me here, man.
1x authentication, when the DHCP request comes from here, from the client, from the client perspective, it's Wi-Fi. They don't know anything else. What we are really doing here at the back end, we started or created a PDP context. And as part of that, the response back from the GGSN, which is the anchor for IP mobility, is the IP address. So we will respond, DHCP response to the client with the IP we got from the GGSN. So IP mobility actually exists.
So we are tight on time. Niv, I appreciate it. The one thing I will impart is that I know that Marcus and I grew up in the Wi-Fi world like most of you. Gregor is obviously an exception. You're very smart in cellular. We have been starting to study cellular. That's where, I know Rocky, I know you're heavy into cellular side. It would behoove all of us to start learning it. And it's tough because we had a class here and Niv is a big part of teaching that. And there were so many acronyms that I have never heard of, just like we had up here. But from just a forward-looking perspective and career.
There's a good book, Introduction to LTE.
That's where we're going. Anyway, Niv, I very much appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.